This is Tim Bryce with my column titled, Expanding Government. Over the last 100 years, the federal government has grown by leaps and bounds. The impetus for this is probably economic related, for example, the Great Depression in today's world economy, and military related, including 2 world wars, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, numerous minor engagements, and the War on Terror. We also have several years of presidential campaigns heaped in where we were promised a lot more than 2 chickens in every pot or 2 cars in every garage. This has all changed the face of our government, where we now have several more agencies and departments to deliver on presidential promises. For example, during my lifetime alone, we have seen the introduction of several cabinet posts such as HUD, Transportation, Energy, Education, Veterans Affairs, EPA, and Homeland Security. There are essentially 2 theories as to why government expands, that it is driven by citizen demand or it is self-generating, that it grows naturally by itself. I tend to believe in the latter, as I see it as an excellent example of Parkinson's law in action. The law, which was devised by C. Northcote Parkinson, a noted British historian and author, was based on his experience with the British civil service. Among his key observations was that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. Basically, he suggests people make work in order to rationalize their employment. Consequently, managers create bureaucracies and superfluous work to justify their existence, not because it is really needed, also known as the making mountains out of molehills phenomenon. We see examples of Parkinson's law in just about every government body, from federal to state to municipal to the smallest bodies of government, including homeowner associations. A few years ago, I was president of my homeowners association, where I was able to balance the budget, update their governing docs, and streamline their administrative affairs. It wasn't hard. It just required a little common sense. Nothing more, nothing less. Since I left the board of directors, though, spending has gone through the roof, and we are now paying more for dues and getting a lot less in return. As I see it, my homeowners association is a microcosm of the problems with government, paying more and getting less. To illustrate, the only visible government services that impacts me directly are roads, water and sewage, the police, and education. Everything else is transparent to me. Others might include welfare, housing, and the environment, but I think this is the exception as opposed to the rule for most people. In other words, the average person sees little in return for the taxes they pay. Then we come to the old argument as to whether government should be more or less intrusive in our lives, which is actually a political argument. There are those who say we need more government since the average citizen is not smart enough to control his or her own destiny. And there are others who want less government control and more freedom. Understand this, the government grew over the last 100 years under both Democratic and Republican administrations. So political ideologue has no real bearing in this regard. It is simply a matter of management, or the lack thereof. Recognizing companies were becoming bloated and inefficient, executives began to flatten corporate hierarchies in the 1980s and 1990s. The poster child for this was Jack Welch of General Electric, who earned the nickname Neutron Jack for his ability to flatten GE units. Welch's approach was reminiscent of Joseph Stalin's purges, which came in waves of 3. The first was to eliminate the dead wood from around the office, representing the people who were the most expendable. The second wave of purges represented a major belt-tightening effort intended to find out who the company could live without. And finally, the third wave was the hardest as it required considerable soul-searching, but uncovered the bedrock of the corporation. What was left was a more efficient organization that was more focused on the right priorities. Now, imagine if we did something like this to our government. It would force a lot of bureaucrats out of office, it would create a leaner and more streamlined government, and it would force them to concentrate on the services that truly matter. But for some reason, I think most people like a fat government. They like having someone looking over their shoulder, kind of like a security blanket. As I found in my homeowner association, though, the price of a bloated government is more expensive, more bureaucratic, and provides less service. I guess it comes down to how dependent we want to be on government and whether we trust their judgment to maintain our interests. As for me, I vote for less government, not more. Here's another way of looking at it. Should the government serve its constituents, or should the constituents serve the government? You tell me. Friends, keep the faith. This is Tim Bryce in Palm Harbor, Florida. Follow me on the internet at timbryce.com.